12 years ago, an engineering team in Hiroshima shut down a production line for the final time. At the time, almost every automotive journalist reached the same conclusion. Mazda's rotary engine was finished. Not delayed, not paused, finished. For decades, the rotary had struggled with emissions regulations, fuel economy targets, and its own engineering weaknesses. By 2012, it seemed the engine had finally lost the battle. Owners moved on, competitors stopped paying attention, and even inside Mazda, most people assumed the story was over. But a small group of Mazda engineers never completely gave up. They continued testing, redesigning, and asking a question that almost nobody else in the industry was asking anymore. Could the rotary engine still have a future? More than a decade later, Mazda has answered that question. The rotary is back, but not in the way most people expected. This isn't simply a nostalgia project or a rotary being placed into a retro sports car. Mazda is using the technology in some of its most important vehicles, and the company has also revealed plans that could take the comeback much further. So why did Mazda bring back an engine that appeared to be finished? And what is the bigger plan hiding behind this comeback? Before we get into that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, now is a great time to do it, because this story gets even more interesting from here. To understand Mazda's decision, you first need to understand how the company thinks. Mazda has never followed the automotive industry in quite the same way as its larger competitors. When people talk about major car companies today, names like Tesla, BYD, Toyota, and Hyundai usually come first. Mazda may be much smaller, but its engineering philosophy is very different. Instead of immediately chasing the latest industry trend, Mazda often takes its time. The company studies an idea, experiments with it, and then develops its own solution, even if everyone else has already moved on. That attitude goes all the way back to the company's beginnings. Mazda was founded in Hiroshima in 1920, originally producing cork products and machine tools. Cars came much later. It wasn't until 1931 that the company introduced its first vehicle, the Mazda Go, a small three-wheeled truck. Over time, Mazda moved into passenger cars and built a reputation not for being the biggest automaker, but for being one of the industry's most persistent engineering companies. Today, Mazda sells around 1.2 million vehicles a year in more than 120 countries. That's a fraction of the production of companies like Toyota or Volkswagen. But Mazda has built a loyal customer base that often returns for one simple reason: the driving experience. That same persistence eventually led Mazda to rotary engine technology. The story begins in the 1960s Hiroshima, when Mazda acquired a license to develop rotary engines. Several other major manufacturers had already examined the technology and walked away. The basic concept was fascinating. Instead of conventional pistons moving up and down inside cylinders, a rotary engine uses a triangular rotor that spins inside a specially shaped housing. As it rotates, it performs the same basic functions as a piston engine: intake, compression, combustion, and exhaust, but in a much smaller package. The compact design was one of its biggest advantages. A rotary could produce impressive power while taking up far less space than a conventional engine. But the technology also had serious problems. Fuel didn't burn as efficiently as it did in a traditional piston engine, which meant poorer fuel economy and greater difficulty meeting increasingly strict emissions standards. Then there were the apex seals. These small components had to keep the combustion chambers sealed while operating under extreme conditions. Wear could lead to reliability problems and higher maintenance costs. For most automakers, the disadvantages outweighed the benefits. Mazda disagreed. In 1967, the company launched the Cosmo Sport, proving that a rotary engine could actually work in a production car. That decision changed Mazda's identity forever. For the next several decades, the rotary became one of the most recognizable technologies associated with the brand. It powered iconic Mazda models and gave the company something its competitors struggled to replicate. But eventually, the same problems that had challenged the rotary from the beginning became impossible to ignore. Fuel efficiency requirements became stricter, emissions regulations became tougher, customers demanded greater reliability and lower running costs. By 2012, Mazda ended rotary production. The industry assumed that was the final chapter. But inside Mazda, a few engineers apparently saw it differently. They didn't see the rotary as a dead technology. They saw it as an unfinished engineering problem. And that difference in perspective is what eventually brought the rotary back. The rotary engine powered legendary Mazda models like the RX-7 and eventually the RX-8, but production ended in 2012 as fuel economy and emissions regulations became increasingly strict. The engine's long-standing weaknesses had finally caught up with it. But Mazda's decision to bring the rotary back isn't simply about nostalgia. It is connected to a problem that still affects many electric vehicle owners today: long-distance driving and charging. EVs are excellent for everyday use. They're quiet, smooth, quick, and comfortable. But on longer journeys, drivers still have to think about charging stations, whether they're available, and how long the charging stop will take. The obvious solution is a larger battery. But bigger batteries also mean more weight, higher costs, and greater demand for raw materials. Mazda took a different approach. Instead of carrying a huge battery everywhere, what if a vehicle could use a smaller battery and have a compact engine generate electricity when necessary? That idea became the foundation of the Mazda MX-30e Skyactiv REV. This is where the rotary engine returned, but in a completely different role. The rotary doesn't drive the wheels. The electric motor handles all of the driving, while the rotary engine works as a generator. When the battery gets low, the rotary produces electricity and sends it back into the system, allowing the vehicle to continue traveling without relying entirely on a massive battery pack. Mazda developed an 830 cubic centimeter single-rotor engine for this purpose. Built with aluminum instead of iron, it weighs roughly 15 kilograms less than the Renesis engine used in the RX-8. The system uses a 17.8 kilowatt-hour battery, providing roughly 53 miles of electric-only range. A 50-liter fuel tank then extends the overall range to nearly 400 miles when the generator is needed. But the real story is what Mazda changed inside the engine. Simply bringing back the old rotary would have recreated the same problems that ended its production. So Mazda redesigned several important components. For the first time, the company used direct fuel injection in a rotary engine. This allows fuel to be delivered into the combustion chamber with greater precision, helping improve combustion, efficiency, and emissions. Mazda also introduced an EGR system to reduce cooling losses during low-load operation. The famous Apex seals received major changes as well. Their width was increased by roughly 25% to around 2.5 millimeters, while the housing received improved coatings designed to reduce friction and wear. Ceramic thermal spray treatment was also used on the side housings to help them handle extreme heat. These upgrades don't make the rotary perfect, but they solve many of the weaknesses that helped kill the engine in the first place, and Mazda may have an even bigger plan. The company has confirmed development of a new rotary-powered sports car based on the iconic SP concept revealed in 2023. Unlike the MX-30's single-rotor generator, the iconic SP uses two 830 cubic centimeter rotors. Mazda has suggested a concept output of around 365 to 370 horsepower, with the car designed to capture the spirit of the legendary RX-7. Mazda executives have described the iconic SP as a potential successor to that iconic sports car, and the company has indicated that it is intended to move beyond the concept stage and toward production. The biggest mystery is how the final car will use its rotary engine. One possibility is that the rotary will continue working only as a generator, similar to the MX-30. But Mazda engineers have also suggested that the hybrid system could potentially allow the rotary to drive the wheels directly in some configuration. If that happens, it would be a major step beyond anything Mazda has produced since the RX-8. The launch date is still uncertain. Some reports suggest 2026, while others point toward 2027. Mazda has said the final decision will depend heavily on market conditions, and although enthusiasts have already started calling the car the RX-9, Mazda has never officially confirmed that name. One thing, however, is becoming increasingly clear. The rotary engine that everyone thought was finished is no longer just a part of Mazda's past. It may be becoming a part of Mazda's future once again. What we do know is what Mazda's iconic SP concept actually looks like, and that alone is worth paying attention to. Mazda doesn't usually put this much engineering detail into a concept unless there is a serious intention behind it. The iconic SP is about 164.5 inches long, 72.8 inches wide, and only 45.2 inches tall, riding on a 102-inch wheelbase. It has a two-seat layout, distinctive swan-style doors, and a special paint color Mazda created specifically for the car called Viola Red. Mazda engineers reportedly targeted a curb weight below 1,500 kilograms, which is an impressive goal for a car carrying batteries and electric motors. The concept also features an almost perfect 50-50 weight distribution, following the same balance-focused philosophy that has shaped Mazda's sports cars for decades. This doesn't look like a concept designed only to attract attention at an auto show. It looks much more like a blueprint for a real sports car. Mazda has also made it clear that this car isn't intended to replace the MX-5 Miata. Instead, it would sit above it, potentially giving Mazda two completely different sports cars in its lineup. The MX-5 would remain the lightweight, affordable option, while the new rotary-powered sports car would be larger, more powerful, and built around the twin-rotor hybrid system. Depending on the final specifications, some automotive journalists have already started comparing it with future sports cars, such as the next-generation Toyota GR Supra and an electrified Porsche 718 Cayman. But the iconic SP may not be the only major development coming from Mazda. At the same time, Mazda is working on a completely new engine platform called Skyactiv Z for the next-generation MX-5, which is expected around 2027. That means two of Mazda's most important sports cars could potentially arrive within a similar period, yet they would follow very different engineering philosophies while competing for the attention of many of the same enthusiasts. And Mazda's ambitions may extend even further. The same engineering effort behind the rotary revival has also been connected to patents involving carbon-neutral fuels and, potentially, hydrogen. That isn't an entirely new direction for Mazda. The company experimented with hydrogen-powered rotary engines as far back as the 2000s. Then there's another project that sounds even more unusual. Separately from the rotary program, Mazda has filed a patent involving a 6-stroke piston engine designed to extract hydrogen from gasoline during combustion. The concept would use that hydrogen to generate additional power while attempting to capture the remaining carbon inside the vehicle, rather than sending it directly through the exhaust. Whether these technologies ever reach production is another question, but they reveal something important about Mazda's approach to the future. While much of the automotive industry is moving toward the idea that internal combustion engines are approaching the end of their lives, Mazda continues to ask a different question. What if the engine itself isn't the problem? What if the real solution is finding a better way to use it? That philosophy also explains how Mazda is positioning itself against companies leading the electric vehicle market. Tesla has built its identity around battery electric vehicles and a large charging network. In areas where charging infrastructure is strong, that approach works extremely well. BYD has taken another path, using its enormous manufacturing scale to produce both electric vehicles and hybrids at prices that many competitors struggle to match. Mazda isn't trying to beat either company through scale or low prices. Instead, It is betting on customers who want the smooth, quiet experience of electric driving, but aren't completely comfortable relying on charging infrastructure for every long journey. For drivers outside major cities where charging networks can still be inconsistent, a system that combines electric driving with a generator that can be refueled in minutes could offer an attractive middle ground. Whether that strategy succeeds will depend on what happens over the next few years. Charging infrastructure will continue to expand, consumer habits will change, and Mazda itself doesn't yet know exactly how the market will develop. But one thing is already certain. An engine that the automotive industry essentially buried in 2012 is now powering a production hybrid, appears to be heading toward a serious sports car, and is connected to research and patents exploring everything from carbon-neutral fuels to hydrogen. The rotary could eventually become an important solution for extending EV range, or it could simply become one of the most fascinating engineering experiments of this era. Nobody knows yet. What we do know is that almost nobody expected the rotary engine to return, and yet, more than a decade after Mazda supposedly closed the book on it, the rotary is quietly becoming part of some of the company's most ambitious plans. The story isn't over, and if you want to see where this technology ultimately ends up once these cars reach the road, make sure you're subscribed, because Mazda's rotary comeback is only getting started.